The senior British soldier responsible for getting people to safety from Afghanistan says up to 7,000 could be evacuated. 300 have left so far. Vice Admiral Sir Ben Key says the Taliban is controlling the gates of the airport in the capital and there's no time to waste.
There is a dynamic political situation running across the city. We make no assumptions about that, other than that we really can't afford to pause and wait.
Meanwhile, as President Biden defends the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, the brother of a soldier killed serving there says he remains proud.
You always want to know that what you're doing has purpose and meaning, but purpose and meaning doesn't always come in victory.
We'll bring you the latest on the evacuation from Afghanistan. Also this lunchtime. More jobs are available than ever before, and average pay is up too. A warning from the data watchdog: don't give too much of your personal information when ordering drinks via the app in your local pub.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, we'll have the latest transfer news as Tammy Abraham agrees a move to Italy. The England striker joins Roma from Chelsea.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. Efforts to evacuate people from Afghanistan to the UK are being stepped up, with 300 people already brought out, with the aim to bring out as many as 7,000. Vice Admiral Sir Ben Key, who is running the UK evacuation operation, says it's a dynamic situation across the capital, Kabul, and they can't afford to pause, with the Taliban controlling the gates of the airport. On the streets of the capital, the Taliban tell people to get back to work and continue with life as normal. Our diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams reports.
At Kabul airport, the exodus of foreigners continues. Civilians boarding an Indian military flight this morning. After yesterday's chaos, planes are once again leaving. Earlier, France sent a plane to evacuate its citizens and their Afghan colleagues. This vast international operation now gathering pace. The man running the British operation says he expects to bring out as many as 7,000 people.
How long have we got to do it? We don't really know. And so every day we are working as hard as we can to put as many forward into this pipeline as we possibly can. Clearly, there is a dynamic political situation running across the city. We make no assumptions about that, other than that we really can't afford to pause and wait.
And this is what it looks like for some. This extraordinary image from an American military flight on Sunday. 650 Afghans crammed on board. In the city, an uneasy, watchful calm. Taliban fighters highly visible as they assert their authority and raise their flag. For now, the city appears to be functioning. Those who've chosen to stay or have no choice, wondering what Taliban rule will be like.
Let's see what Afghanistan brings. I want to stay here. I want to fight for my students. I want to fight for our vision of Afghanistan. And I know things are never going to be the same anymore. It's just, I have to be here.
In Herat, which fell to the Taliban last week, some things have not changed. Schoolgirls were at their desks today. Scenes unthinkable when the Taliban last ruled the country.
My hope is that we will continue to resist any possible regression and any possible deprivation. And the Taliban must also realize that they cannot keep Afghanistan to the knee. They have to live with the world. Only in a moderate situation, moderate government, moderate Islam, that we can live with ourselves and with the world.
These are strange, uncertain times, a world in which a female presenter in Kabul can still interview a representative of the Taliban. But for how long? It's been 20 years since the Taliban last ruled Kabul. Not everyone here even remembers what it was like. The militants say they want an inclusive Islamic government. What, people wonder, will that mean? Paul Adams, BBC News.
Let's talk now to our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette. Lise, any word on who's going to lead the new Taliban government?
Well, I think we just have to look at the existing Taliban movement, which is very much an Islamic movement. It's headed by an Islamic emir, Haibatullah. He will likely, almost certainly, play a role as they transfer their movement to become a new Islamic system and, in effect, the new government of Afghanistan. We have reports that the deputy leader of the Taliban, who was one of their senior negotiators, Mullah Baradar, is now on his way from the Gulf state of Qatar, where the Taliban have a political office, and is on his way to Kabul. There have been reports that other senior Taliban officials have already arrived in the city. They too, just like Afghans, just like pretty well everyone around the world, have been surprised by the speed and scale of their sudden advance. Within 10 days, they took over all of Afghanistan, which is absolutely extraordinary and, of course, devastating for so many Afghans. Hence those chaotic, frantic, desperate scenes at the airport. But for those who cannot leave, they're coming literally face to face with the Taliban on their streets, as Taliban patrol saying they're trying to prevent looting. We have the reports of female reporters, of Afghans, out on the streets presenting. Is this the face of the first few days or the face of the new government? A big question for Afghans and for all of us.
Thank you, Lise. Here, the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says details of a new resettlement scheme for Afghan refugees will be announced soon. It'll be aimed at helping those most in need, including women and girls. The Home Office says it will be guided by the capacity of local authorities when deciding how many Afghan refugees will be allowed to settle in the UK. Our political correspondent is Jonathan Blake, so everybody wants to know how many Afghans is the UK likely to accept?
And there is no number yet from the government, Victoria, but as you see those flights resuming from Kabul in the immediate aftermath of the Taliban takeover, Afghans who've worked for the UK being evacuated, attention is turning to the longer term and what the government might do to help some of the many tens of thousands of people who will no doubt flee the country in the coming days and weeks. That bespoke settlement scheme, which you mentioned, is what the government is planning, and the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab was asked for more details of that this morning.
We're working on that very carefully. We've always been a big-hearted nation. You've got a Home Secretary and a Foreign Secretary who know what that means from our own personal history. But let me allow the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister to come forward with the details of it. The details will be set out by the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister in due course.
Now, we're told it will be similar to a scheme put in place for people fleeing fighting in Syria. Under that, some 20,000 Syrians have been resettled in the UK, and there is high expectation on the government to match that or go further from opposition parties. Labour saying that an ambitious, generous offer is needed. The Liberal Democrats saying that it needs to be at least 20,000. The Scottish National Party talking about 35,000 people or more that could be resettled in the UK. Conservative MPs too putting the pressure on the government, saying variously that now is not the time to be strict. Time is of the essence, and one describing this as what could be the biggest mass migration of people since the end of the Second World War. As you heard, the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has said the UK has always been a big-hearted nation. We'll find out when the Prime Minister speaks in Parliament tomorrow what that means in practice.
Thank you. President Biden says he stands squarely behind his decision to pull US troops out of Afghanistan. He said he wasn't willing to sacrifice more young American lives when the Afghans themselves had caved in. America spent $2 trillion on the war and over 2,000 troops lost their lives. Our correspondent Aleem Makboul reports from Hookstown in Pennsylvania.
It's a procession in rural western Pennsylvania to honour an American soldier killed in a very different world. One of more than 2,500 US military lives lost in Afghanistan in the past 20 years. 25-year-old Staff Sergeant Dylan Elchin was killed by a roadside bomb nearly 3 years ago. But the sense of loss is still overwhelming for his family. Though the town is paying tribute now to its lost son with the renaming of a post office.
It's very wonderful to see Dylan honored. He sacrificed everything for our country, and I believe that we should all be honoring our military more and realize what they do for not only the United States of America, but for the entire world.
But as was referred to even during the tribute ceremony for Dylan, This was all taking place with a backdrop of a huge amount of criticism of the US and of the fall of Kabul to the Taliban.
Is it difficult to understand what it was all for, given that the very people that Dylan was fighting against are now left in charge of Afghanistan?
Dylan, at that given moment, when he had to follow his orders to go accomplish his mission back in November 2018, he did everything that was asked of him and then some. Regardless of what has happened during this past week and in the past month, I know that Dylan did everything right.
As I have personally suffered the loss of my own brother, who also died.
And for the chaplain here, who himself served in Afghanistan like his brother Joseph, who was killed, how hard has it been to watch the events of recent days?
It has been difficult. You always want to know that what you're doing has purpose and meaning, but purpose and meaning doesn't always come in victory. I believe sometimes it comes in the sacrifice and the experience of it. Are we better off? Is the country better off? Are they better off? That's hard to say.
They're profound questions being grappled with, and a stark contrast to the clear conviction of this nation when the war began 2 decades ago. Aleem Maqbool, BBC News, in Hookstown, Pennsylvania.
Let's talk now to our North America correspondent, Barbara Plett-Usher. Barbara, what has been the reaction to President Biden's defence?
Well, it may have stemmed a bit of the criticism within his party. One senior Democrat praised him for laying out the costs of the lengthy war and making the decision to end it. But by and large, Victoria, it didn't really stop the criticism. It was widely observed that although Mr. Biden said the buck stops with me, he had plenty of blame for the way Donald Trump handled the Afghan issue, for Afghan leaders who fled, for the Afghan military that didn't fight. And that didn't go down well with many people, especially one veteran. She said he's basically blaming people who sacrificed their lives for us. He's saying, you can't do it on your own, too bad. There was also widely observed that he basically took responsibility for making the decision to go, not for the manner in which it was executed. And Republicans in particular seized on that because, of course, they had supported a withdrawal under President Trump. But they are aghast at the way it is being played out. And one former senior official under the Bush administration said, look, the speech was a red herring because he talked about the decision to leave, not about the shambolic way it's being done. President Trump himself weighed in, said it's not about leaving Afghanistan, it's about the incompetence of leaving Afghanistan. So you had those voices. Democrats were less vocal, but many of them are still very, very unhappy and uneasy. They've been focusing on the humanitarian consequences, especially for women and girls, as the Taliban take over. And they're also upset about the delay in getting out those people who helped the Americans. They've been asking some of them for a refugee evacuation plan for their allies for some time, and it's been very slow. So they are not happy at all. And in the end, I think they are also worried about the fact that their commander-in-chief, the image that's going to be associated with him as the September 11th anniversary comes, is that there's this a hasty exit, or it looks shambolic, from Afghanistan, and the Taliban are taking over the country again.
Thank you very much, Barbara. For those here with friends and relatives living in Afghanistan, there is fear and apprehension. Tim Muffet has been spending time with members of London's Afghan community as the events of the last few days have unfolded.
Events 3,500 miles away have never felt so close to home. Fearful and scared that things will get worse.
People are torturing for no reason. Why? Because they're human. I ask Great Britain to help them as a humanity. That's all I can say.
The Afghanistan and Central Asian Association Centre in Feltham, West London. For 20 years, this organisation's offered support for the Afghan community in the UK. Most who come here have friends and family in a country in crisis.
There's kids suffering, there's seniors, there's old people, there's homeless people.
It's a shame for all of us, not only me, for all of the human beings, all of the communities, all around the world.
proper a job.
Maria's mother and 4 sisters are in the Afghan capital.
3 weeks ago, my father, he passed away, and now they are by themselves.
On Friday, before the Taliban reached the city, she managed to speak to them.
People are coming from the provinces under control of Taliban, and the girls had nothing to do without to stay on the streets, and they were begging for money and for food, for water. In this bad situation, getting worse day by day.
Talking to your sister in those circumstances, how hard is that for you?
It's too much. It's heartbreaking for me because at this situation, I can't do for them anything.
Amidst the despair, there are positive moments here. Lessons in Farsi for children, many of whom have never been to the country of their parents' birth. And classes in English for adults looking to improve their language skills, as well as food, advice and support.
How important is this place at the moment, given the terrible things which are happening in Afghanistan?
I think this place plays a vital role, and people are becoming very, very, not just upset, but also anxious and confused about what will happen in the future.
Tim Muffet, BBC News.
The time now is 16 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. The senior British soldier responsible for getting people to safety from Afghanistan says up to 7,000 could be evacuated. 300 have left so far, and he says there is no time to waste. Coming up, apprenticeships with a difference in one seaside town in Devon.
Coming up on the BBC News channel, Andy Murray says he feels good as he moves into the second round of the Cincinnati Open. It's the first singles success on hard court since having his metal hip surgery.
The UK economy is continuing to bounce back from lockdown, with job vacancies hitting a record high of almost 1 million and wages ticking up too. Unemployment also fell in the 3 months to June. Our economics correspondent Andy Verity has this.
At this construction site in Huddersfield, 18 houses are being built. But so far, only 4 have been completed. The amount of work getting done in the construction industry has been slowing down across the country, not because of COVID, but because of 2 shortages: raw materials and workers. In this sector alone, there are now 38,000 vacancies being advertised.
It's facing a shortage of young people coming into the industry, without a shadow of a doubt. We need more young people of all trades. So that's bricklayers, carpenters, plumbers, electricians. And there's an acute shortage.
This site's kept on workers into their 60s, and across the industry, they're being forced to pay more, with the average wage up by 12% over the past year. And it's not just this industry. Across the economy, vacancies are a fifth higher than they were before coronavirus, and employers can't find the staff they need.
I think it's a perfect storm of lots of things. So, we've had a pandemic, people have not been moving jobs, so people have been kind of sticking where they are. So you've got a lack of candidate movement. You've got a lot of EU workers that went home during the pandemic, and actually it's really difficult to get back if you want to. And the skill shortages, you're going back to a lack of apprenticeships from a long time ago that haven't been coming through.
There is still about 1.9 million more people workless than there were before the pandemic, with more than 607,000 fully furloughed, nearly 850,000 partially furloughed, 201,000 fewer on employers' payrolls, and nearly 300,000 fewer in self-employed work. Slowest to recover from the pandemic's economic symptoms is London, where there are still far fewer jobs to be done serving coffee and lunch to workers in the city, for example, many of whom are still working from home. But in the wider economy, the big issue in the jobs market is now not so much people who can't find work as employers who can't get the staff. In health and social care, for example, a record 161,000 roles are going unfilled. That's likely to put upward pressure on inflation in the form not just of rising prices, but of lengthening queues and waiting times. Andy Verity, BBC News.
Heavy rains have caused flooding in southern Haiti, just days after it was struck by that powerful earthquake. Rescue work was still underway when the tropical storm hit the island. Our correspondent James Clayton reports from the town of Lacaille, which is in the path of the storm.
The church behind me is called L'Église de Sacré-Cœur, and as you can see, it's been hugely impacted by this earthquake. You can see right the way through it. There's a statue of the Virgin Mary completely smashed. There are these huge lines that cut across the church. It's structurally unsound, and actually the locals have told me they're worried that that spire up there could fall at any moment because there are these huge cracks down the side of it. And then across the road, you have the local coffin maker, a small business trying to make ends meet, and once again, it's been totally decimated by this earthquake. And really, this is a very similar story across this town. There are some buildings that are fine, or at least are cracked that haven't fallen, and others that have completely fallen in on themselves. The death count at the moment is still increasing, and people are worried now about a storm. There are dark clouds over that way. We've heard it's raining in some parts of this region already, and people do worry that now they're forced out of their homes, they're going to have to sleep in the wet and the cold.
James Clayton reporting from Haiti. Here from today, plasma will be taken from blood donations in England to produce medicine for patients with cancer and rare immune diseases. There's been a ban on using British plasma since 1998 because of fears about the human form of BSE. But regulators say it is now safe. Let's talk to our health correspondent Dominic Hughes. What difference might this make, Dominic?
Well, Victoria, plasma makes up around half of our blood. Crucially, it contains antibodies, and these antibodies can be turned into a treatment called immunoglobulin. Now, that can help boost the immune systems of people whose immune systems are under threat or otherwise compromised. So, for example, some people have rare conditions or diseases, but also people who are being treated for cancer can have compromised immune systems. Now, as you mentioned, since the 1990s, there's been this ban on using plasma produced in the UK from UK donors because of concerns about the spread of new variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is the human form of mad cow disease. But the medicines regulator has now said that British donor plasma is safe, and the government earlier in the year changed the restrictions. And NHS Blood and Transplant say this change will improve long-term supplies and save lives, because until now, the UK has been very reliant on plasma imports, mostly from the United States. But because of the COVID outbreak, those donations tailed off. Now we get a fresh supply from UK donors. Now, there are around 770 blood donors in England who will be able to provide plasma now. They say that's not going to have an impact on transfusions because they mostly use red blood cells. This is something that's going to happen in England. In Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, they haven't decided to change the rules yet, but they could well do so in the coming months.
Thank you very much, Dominic. New Zealand has announced a snap lockdown after a man tested positive for COVID. That's the first case in 6 months. It was detected in Auckland, which will be in lockdown for a week, while the rest of the country will be in lockdown for just 3 days. Authorities say they are working on the assumption that the new case was the Delta variant. Hundreds of firefighters in southern France are battling a wildfire that's forced thousands of residents and tourists to evacuate as a precaution. Officials say the blaze broke out on Monday and has so far burned more than 3 square kilometres of forest and scrubland to the west of the resort of Saint-Tropez. Firefighting aircraft are dumping water to help douse the flames. Bob Dylan is being sued by a woman who says the US singer-songwriter sexually abused her in 1965 when she was just 12. Her legal case alleges the star exploited his status as a musician to provide her with alcohol and drugs and sexually abuse her multiple times and use threats of physical violence. It says the abuse took place at Dylan's apartment in New York's Chelsea Hotel. Mr. Dylan denies the allegations. The data watchdog is warning pub customers to think carefully before handing over personal information when signing up to apps before ordering drinks. App and web-based ordering has become pretty commonplace during the pandemic, and despite the easing of restrictions, the big pub chains are continuing to offer them as an option. But there are concerns about the amount of personal data being collected. Our consumer affairs correspondent Coletta Smith has the story.
We'll wait until We've all ordered it. The lads are out for pints, but which will be quicker, the app or the bar? The race is on. Right, it's done. We wait. Table service sweeps in with the phone orders before the slow coaches make it back.
But if this place was packed, I'd be dreaming for the app. Like, I wouldn't go anywhere near the bar.
You end up with like 10 different passwords for, you know, your Green King, your Everspeed. I've got like so many different apps and stuff now. Postcode, you know, email. There seems like a lot of irrelevant information that you don't technically need.
The information is irrelevant. We all know it, but it's kind of like a cost that we kind of have to pay almost.
But the privacy watchdog wants customers to be careful not to give away too many personal details.
It needs to be relevant to the order, and it also needs to be not excessive. You know, if you are a member of the public and you're filling in, you know, your details, and you think, hang on a second, they want my name and address, they want other personal details, question it. If it feels excessive, just pause for a second.
We've been in touch with the biggest pub chains who all told me their apps are here to stay.
They've all got one now.
And tech companies say take-up across the industry is still on the rise.
In terms of small independent businesses, you know, the take-up's been slower, but it's still probably around 50% now. The data that we collect from individuals has gradually been worn away now to a point where we want to make it as simple and easy as possible for customers to sign up.
Bar manager Steve makes a little less money on every order through the app, but it's staying because plenty of customers are still using it.
The bar service is higher, it's roughly 70% at the moment compared to the app, which is 30%. But on our busy periods, Friday and Saturday nights, then the app comes into play more because people don't particularly want to queue at the bar, so they use the table service more.
Whether you're an app addict or you've got an app aversion, the reality is that these things are here to stay, with more and more venues offering apps as an option for customers to order. But for most of us, the reality is we'll never read the terms and conditions behind the app, especially after you've had a few. However the next round is ordered, the chief question is who's paying.
Cheers, guys.
Coletta Smith, BBC News in Manchester.
An apprenticeship is usually in trades like plumbing, hairdressing or bricklaying. But one town in Devon has been giving young people training in stilt walking, clowning and puppetry. It's part of an effort to give traditional seaside entertainment a boost and attract more visitors. Sarah Ransom went to have a look.
Roll up, come and see the Punch and Judy show.
Echoing the past on the prom.
I can go out and do funny things and spread joy and be joyful.
Make way!
Trainee street performers are putting into practice newly learnt skills of the showman.
I think we all need a laugh and we all need to feel joyous at the moment.
In celebration of traditional seaside entertainment. In its heyday, one of the draws of the Great British Holiday were the professional performers.
Not again, Mr. Small.
The hope is it's the same for this new generation.
You see a man 6, 7, 8 foot tall walking down the street in the 1800s, it'll have the same reaction as right now. And it's actually the same joy and the same feelings of excitement, and I don't think that's the thing that will stop.
Welcome to Uncle Taco's Flea Circus!
As overseas travel became more pocket-friendly, small resorts like this one saw visitor numbers drop. Now a new project has seasoned showmen sharing the tricks of their trade to help keep the skills alive, in the hope of also giving a family-friendly boost to the town.
We grew up in Timoth and remembered watching it when we were children many years ago, and it's really nice to see.
It's important to try and keep the traditions going, isn't it? It brings back childhood memories, to be honest.
It's exciting, it's just amazing.
I'll give you a jolly one this time.
And it's not just about the music, the magic and the merriment.
The skills they've got in teamwork, pride, a sense of their confidence in presenting in public space. These are life skills, I hope, that they'll take with them for the rest of their lives, an experience they will never forget.
In the box!
While the sun shines, the shows will go on. The plan is to take the training and the tricks to more places next year. Sarah Ransom, BBC News in Teignmouth.
Not sure if it's seaside weather. Let's talk to Darren. Darren, I nearly put my central heating on last night.
Yeah, you and a lot of other people, I suspect. It doesn't feel much like summer at the moment. Doesn't look much like summer. If you're going to be heading to the beach today, you probably need a jumper. And the next few days, stay cool. There'll be a lot of cloud coming our way and maybe a bit of rain from time to time as well. There will be some sunshine breaking through. And today we've had some earlier on, actually, in Inverness. And the clouds looking a bit thinner, actually, in Scotland. It was a dull and damp start, though, across England and Wales this morning. Most of that rain and drizzle has moved through. Still a bit damp in Northern Ireland, but we are starting to see some sunshine coming through across southeastern parts of Wales, and we'll get some sunshine in the West Country as well. These areas sheltered by the mountains of Wales from that northwesterly breeze, which is making it feel cool. For most of us, we are under a cloud through the rest of the day. As a result, temperatures will be 17 or 18 degrees typically, so quite cool out there. And we'll keep a lot of cloud around this evening and overnight. It'll lower onto the hills, so some misty, murky weather around here. Maybe the odd pocket of light rain or drizzle to come as well. With that blanket of cloud, temperatures should be down to around 12 to 14 degrees as they were last night. Bit of rain coming into the Northern Isles, could creep into the north of mainland Scotland. The rest of Scotland tomorrow should see some sunshine. Elsewhere, it's a dull start, but that cloud should tend to lift and thin. Many places will have a dry day and it won't look quite so gloomy in the afternoon, and with a bit more brightness, we're going to find temperatures more widely up to 20 or 21 Celsius. Still a little below average for this time of the year. Let's look further into the Atlantic, and heading into Thursday, we've got these weather fronts heading our way from the west. They're moving in very slowly, but they will bring thicker cloud and some rain into Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, so it's not getting quite as far across the UK on Thursday, and it looks drier now through the Midlands and across some eastern parts of England. Still probably with a lot of cloud and those temperatures struggling up to around 17 to 21 Celsius. Heading towards the end of the week, is it going to get any better? Well, lower pressure is sitting there to the west of the UK. This weather front is really slowing down. It's mainly going to be bringing rain, I think, on Friday to Ireland, Northern Ireland. Ahead of it, maybe some brighter skies, a little bit of sunshine coming through, and the winds will be light as well. Those temperatures creeping up to around 21 to 23 degrees across parts of England and Wales. And it could get warmer across parts of England and Wales on Saturday, briefly, before the rain comes in from the west. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Darren. The main news this lunchtime: the senior British soldier responsible for getting people to safety from Afghanistan says up to 7,000 could be evacuated. 300 have left so far, and he says there is no time to waste.
There is a dynamic political situation running across the city. We make no assumptions about that, other than that we really can't afford to pause and wait.
That's all from the BBC News at 1, and on BBC One now we'll join the BBC's news teams where you are. Have a lovely afternoon.